Hello and welcome to Bad Community Advice. I'm your host. My name is Seth Wrestler, and this is the show where we ask community professionals to come on and give us their terrible tips and toxic takeaways. Today, we are talking specifically about a revenue model that's very, very popular. And so it's tempting for a lot of community builders to use to try and generate some revenue from their members, but it doesn't work. And we're going to talk about why. My guest got her start growing a community into a multi-million-dollar revenue stream for a brand in Oregon. Now she runs Ember, where she helps coaches, consultants, and creators build thriving online communities for their businesses. Please welcome Bri Leever. Hi, Bri. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing okay. I'm overcoming the same cold that I think you are. We both got it at the beginning of the year, so you
We've
know.
been taken out, but will not be held back. We
No,
are here.
no, no, absolutely not. But look, I'm really excited to have you on. I do want to point out that you have a lot of fantastic resources for people who are interested in community building. You've got a great YouTube channel, but I think the thing I want to point out is the podcast, since this is a podcast. Um, on this podcast, we give terrible advice. You have a podcast where you actually give really, really good advice. I've learned a lot from your podcast. So, tell us a little bit about Dear Bri.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, I'm really glad to see both sides of the advice coin today, so this will be a lot of fun for me. Yeah, but Dear Bri is an advice column for community conundrums, fiascos, and drama. So I like to say it's good community strategy, deep fried, and great storytelling. We pick a letter from an anonymous writer and extrapolate insights, takeaways, how to maybe do it differently next time, or how to validate what you're doing as a community builder. Because sometimes you just feel kind of crazy herding cats. So the podcast covers a different topic every episode, and it's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite elements of my job.
Very cool. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because this is a topic that I've heard you talk about on your podcast, and I love the way you talk about it. I think you talk about it brilliantly. So I want to get straight to your bad advice, which is this: create a free community that leads to your paid community. Create a free community that leads. This is what we would call in the software world like a freemium model. This is like, oh, you get the software, you can use it for a month, no charge, and then if you want to keep using it after that, you've got to pay for it. That model works really well in the software world. Why does it not work in the community building world?
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be a great idea. And I understand what we think will happen in the community context, but community as a product is quite different than other products and services. And what's especially different is that most products and services that we are marketing, especially in American culture, come down to two things: convenience and comfort. And community, unfortunately, is neither convenient nor comfortable. And so it's always kind of hilarious to see marketers like myself try to market it to a society where those are two of our top values. Why that sets us up to market community differently than other products and services is because how you posture someone to come into the community has a great impact on the quality of the experience inside of the community for everyone. So I'm going to give you an example that'll help elucidate this a little bit. If you're just selling a course, and I think back to like the last course you bought and whether or not you finished it, probably didn't, and that's not a you thing. That's a statistically you're
No, but
probably
tomorrow, I'm gonna,
Tomorrow,
yeah.
you could
So
decide to finish it
I,
tomorrow.
like I said, I got sick.
I know, exactly. Life happens right when you think you're going to finish that course. Whether or not you finish it, you're the only one who lost on the knowledge and the value. Like, you paid your money, you didn't go through it, you lost the value. In community, when someone like opts in to be a part of the community and they don't end up showing up, this not just hurts their experience in the community, it impacts everyone's experience, because the nature of community is that I'm getting some value here from my connections between other members. So when we have a freemium model, psychologically, we're not getting that active skin in the game up front. And people will often come in with a little bit of this like free buffet mindset. They're like, quick, get as much as I can or take as much as I can. And it really does your members a disservice and doesn't posture them to be able to give in the community, which is ultimately what greases the wheels of the whole thing and makes it really valuable and makes it valuable for that participant. So you have to think about with community, you have to think about not just how do I get somebody in, but in the process of getting them in, how am I posturing them to create value in this community and get the most value out of this community, which often are inextricably linked. What they give in tends to be what they get out of it. So that's just one layer to it. And I can talk about the other layers, but that's kind of like at a high level, psychologically what I see happen in freemium.
In other words, you want to set the expectation when people first enter the community, not only that they're going to be takers, but they're going to be givers as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the freemium model undermines that. So
it can. The other really tricky thing about the freemium model is you are serving two completely different members. So I have a free masterclass where I talk about the 4 types of communities. And I really kind of draw some boundaries around it, saying like we have free communities, we have paid communities, and they really have 2 different intentions. Free communities I call, education-centric free communities I call nurturing communities. And the intention of the community is to nurture your customer towards some other product or service or success with your product or service. Paid communities, on the other hand, are where the community itself is the product. And when you combine them into the same experience, and we tend to think like usually it starts because we're like, oh, we have a paid community, but we want to offer people a taste. So that's why we're going to give them access for a limited amount of time, or we're going to give them access to these few spaces where they can see what's happening. They'll be teased, they'll be enticed, they'll see everything that's happening. They'll want to then upgrade to the paid, which sounds nice in theory. However, the nature of community is that it's really full, and if you're doing it well, it's quite overwhelming. And what I've found happens is instead of getting the right message to the right person at the right time, which is what a good marketing funnel and sales funnel does, community just throws them into the chaos. And now, instead of being able to really create a targeted message and a targeted journey to get them to join the community when the time is right, we're just throwing like tons of messages at them all the time. And it is like they are one heartbeat away from unsubscribing from all of these notifications because they're like, well, that doesn't pertain to me. Well, that doesn't pertain to me. A good marketing funnel moves towards more targeting. We want to get more niche. We want to understand our customer even better. And throwing them into the wild west of a community environment and hoping that they see the event that like solves the problem that they're interested in today and hoping that that entices them enough to come into the community is just not good marketing. It's not savvy. It's not targeted. It's not specific. So I would rather invest in marketing systems that get the right message to the right person at the right time about what's happening in the community, but not in this like free-for-all environment where there's just like a constant barrage of information.
So that makes sense. On the other hand, I understand why somebody who is thinking about joining a community wants to check it out first. And what I always think of when I think of this is colleges and universities here in the United States, where before I enroll or even apply, I want to go see the campus, see who's on it, these are the type of people I like hanging out with. I mean, I kind of went on that, that typical trip with my mom when we went and visited, a bunch of campuses. And I didn't know when I was young, do I want a campus with 30,000, 50,000 students, or do I want something that's got 3,000? How can I figure that out? So in that kind of situation, how can people check out a community? Or how can you offer them an opportunity to see what a community is all about without doing a freemium model?
Yeah, that's actually the perfect example and analogy for what we do and don't want to do. So for a prospective student, I don't know about at your university, but at my university, prospective students were like gods. Like it was like, oh, it's such a big deal. We love them. We're like doting on them because we want them to come and be in our cult. I went to a small liberal arts Christian university, so maybe it was different. Don't judge me too harshly. But that's exactly the difference that I'm talking about, where it's a curated experience. You have somebody who is like partnered up with that new person. They're walking them through, here's our culture, here's how classes work. Like you're giving them a taste of the culture, of the experience, but it's highly curated. And it's very different from just like throwing someone, like if you had a prospective student who came in and you were like, well, campus is yours. Go ahead, walk around and like just go into a classroom. Like that would be a terrible experience. They would be like, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what types of classes I should be shadowing or auditing, and like how do I just strike up a conversation with someone randomly? So that's actually the perfect example of what we do want to do, which is a highly curated environment that is designed for the new member. My favorite way of facilitating this, what I call the cheese plate. So the other analogy that I use is like instead of giving people unending all access, all access pass to like the old country buffet and the cheese board buffet, we want to make a cheese plate. We want to make a sampler, and we say this little plate that we put together is the best representation of the assortment of accoutrements that we have available for you today. But it's not like they get unending access. So there's a couple ways you can do it. My favorite is to leverage events. Events have a boundaried nature to them because there is a start time and an end time. There's no confusion when you are RSVPing to join an event. Like, am I in the community? Am I not in the community? Will I be kicked out of the community? What do I have access to? What do I not? Instead, inviting them to an event or a full day event or a 3-part series, like an event series hosted in your community can be a phenomenal test to run to see not just if people are interested in coming to one event, but what the show up rate is to the second part of that series. That time-bound nature of the event allows you to run a much more thoughtful experiment where you can actually see and test which variables are getting people to convert into the community rather than just kind of throwing them into the abyss of the community and hoping that they activate at a certain time. So events tend to be my number one go-to for giving people a taste test.
Yeah. And we should point out that events are great for community building precisely because it is not, I come from the world of content creators, right? And content creators, you go somewhere, you build it, you make your movie, you write your novel, you record your podcast episode, and then you publish it and it's out. And community is this act of co-creation where you're not really, you think you know what you're building, but it's going to change over time and it's going to evolve. And events are really helpful for precisely the reason you said, they end. So you can try something and then if it doesn't work, it ends. But also in this case, you can let people have a taste and then it ends. Do you have a preference? I mean, is it normally a series of events that are designed just for, we'll call them potentials, right? Potential community members before they sign up. So in this case, it would be like those people who take the tour of the college campus, right? And that's an event just for them. Or do you ever do events that are regular events part of your community? Like maybe, you have a monthly event for the community and you just designate, 3 a year that are going to be open to the public, or maybe anybody can come to one and then they're out. Do you have any preference or do they all kind of work?
Yeah, both serve different purposes. So, and it depends again on where these people are in your funnel. How warm are they to joining your community? I love having a seasonal activation. This is like one of my favorite designs for a membership model specifically. When your membership is evergreen and people can join at any time, there's never a good reason to join today. So we have to give them a good reason to join today. So these types of, I call them activations. It can be a single event, they can be an event series, but something special, time bound, that is run in the community. Could be challenges, something that is designed for your members, but then is also operating as a way to give people from outside of the community a taste of your community. Now, depending on your funnel and how that's set up, sometimes a more robust challenge or activation might actually merit non-members still paying, even just to be a part of that activation. And that can be a nice stepping stone, especially if your community is a high ticket community. Having like a set aside program that is a fraction of the cost of your full membership, but gives them a taste, but they have more buy-in. That can be a nice mechanism. But then sometimes these activations actually operate well as free to the public, well, free for your members, free to the public, maybe for a limited time. And you can use it purely for that discovery purposes. There's also a lot of value in having more nurturing mechanisms that are just for prospective members. So you might have like a live Q&A about your community, or like for me, one of the mechanisms for me is that free masterclass on the 4 types of communities. I'm like, in order for people to even be ready to consider joining my community or one of our activations, they have to be really clear on which type of community they are building. So that's more on demand. It's not like a live event, so it's not the exact example that I'm giving, but those can be really helpful too at the top of your funnel to like help make sure everyone's postured and nurtured to be ready to buy.
When you're talking about these models, does it make a difference whether you have a community that is evergreen, something that anybody can join at any time, as opposed to, and I'm going to beat this college university analogy to death, but it helps me think about it. That's an example of a community that you can only join at the beginning of a semester. You can't join on November 5th. You got to come in September or January. How do you think about that? Is one better than the other? I don't know. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's two different models and formats, and approaches to community building, and each has their own strengths and each has their own weaknesses and heavy lifting too. So the membership evergreen model, what's really nice about this is you can build more evergreen content that all leads to your membership. So like lead magnets from your website, your podcast leading to your community. Like it's as a staple offer, there's just an ease that comes in your content ecosystem to point to that offer. That is really nice. You don't have to like worry about the timing and the cadence of like, is it open enrollment or is it closed? And what's our call to action? And how do we activate people? People tend to gravitate to the membership option because it has a seemingly lighter lift in that way because it's always open. But again, if there's no good reason, well, if anyone can join at any time, then you have to give them a good reason to join today. So in some ways, it seems like a lighter lift, but that doesn't mean you can stop marketing that membership. Even if you have lots of lead magnets and things dripping in the background, you still need to make sure, as if you're serious about growth in your community and if you're outpacing your attrition rate, you're likely still going to need some seasonal campaigns to add some meat to why people need to join now. So memberships tend to be a lighter lift, but it depends on how heavily you're pushing those seasonal campaigns. For the cohort, I'm going to call them cohort-based communities. They're time-bound. There's a start, there's an end. We bring people in groups. These have quite a few pros associated with them. One is like when you are marketing them, you are full in marketing them. Like you have your launch window to like accept applications, bring members in. So internally and for you and your team, it can create some simplicity because there's just a cadence to like the launch window, the execution window, the recovery and prep window. You're not always having to think about every part of the funnel all of the time, and you're not having to execute all of it all of the time. Some people and teams work better that way. They kind of need that they need that deadline of marketing their community and their group as motivation to get it out there. So if that's you, this is kind of like
Yes.
kind of depends on who's
Yes.
building it. And so, yeah, we know what that feels like. Yeah.
100% that's me. I mean, I think it also depends on the sort of the nature of the community. I mean, there are some times where it is helpful to have everybody going through the community journey kind of together because they all need to sort of, it's almost like a quest and they all need to be on the same path. Whereas if you have a community, I just, interviewed the woman who runs Art Girl in New York City, which is just a group of people who come in and they doodle and they do crafts and they create art as a way of, just wellness and, and creative expression. And that's not something where everybody has to be on the same wavelength through the whole journey. So it can depend on that as well, right?
And that's what I touch on in that masterclass. So the kind of core way that I think about the different types of communities and models is the education to connection ratio. By education, I mean a guided, intentional learning journey versus connection is where your members are getting value from the interactions with other members. Now, comparing these is a little bit awkward because education is an outcome, but connection is a vehicle to some other outcome. So in education-centric communities where let's say your ratio is 80% education, 20% connection, we're guiding members through, like we're telling them we are going to teach you how to go from point A to point B. We're going to hit these milestones along the way. And it's kind of like the big group road trip. And so for these folks, more of the time bound, like starting them at the same time, ending them at the same time, more of a cohort model can be a better fit. Whereas for communities where connection is the main value proposition, whether it's like the connection is leading to insights on your work and your feedback, or practicing your public speaking, or sharing your reflections from the art that you made, that is a lot more organic. It's kind of like looking at a city and like this web of connections that are all kind of happening a little bit more serendipitously. And that doesn't mean that there's not intentional design behind it to lead to very direct outcomes, but it does mean that evergreen container and membership tends to be a better environment to hold those types of interactions because it's not always super linear like it is in the educational journey.
I like that way of thinking about it, whether it's educational or connection. Let's go back to the events you were talking about as a way for people to check out the community, see what it's all about. A, do you do something different in events for a community that is more educational versus a community that is more about connection? Like what actually happens at the events? And B, do you bring existing members to those events, or are they just for new people who are kicking the tires?
Great questions. So yes, definitely bring existing members because we want them to be setting the pace for the culture that your prospective members are going to see in the community. Your existing members will do a much better job of selling your community than you could ever do. So you need to curate the environment, but do make sure you have some existing members there. If nothing else, like I've seen event types where it is the program or event itself is for prospective members, and we simply invite like 1 to 3 existing members to come and speak on or share a story about something specific. So it doesn't mean that it has to be a full open invite to all of your existing members, but at least intentionally inviting a few existing members will dramatically help your marketing, especially when they're intentionally selected and guided. I'm sorry, what was the first part of your question? Oh, different types of
What
events
do we
for
actually
education
do? I
versus
mean, so
connection.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, what are the actual activities at these
Yep.
events? And I
So
assume you're talking primarily about virtual events as opposed to in-person events.
I am, but the same rules can be applied to in person as well. Um, so we want to go back to that education to connection ratio and decide for your community as a whole, what's the ratio of education to connection? Once you know that, when you are using an event to give a taste of your community, you want that same ratio to be reflected in that event. So if you're deciding our community is really 80% of the value here comes from interactions between members and that connection, and 20% comes from, more curriculum and guided education, then you want to ask yourself in this 90 minutes that we have for this free event open to non members, how are we reflecting 80% connection, 20% guided educational journey? Um, you can play with those fluctuations and you can, like, once you've done it and reflected it accurately, you can always tinker and say, because what will actually happen, this is like a really interesting part of this, especially for connection centric communities, you often kind of have to trick people into that ratio because they usually will come into the community and what gets them to buy is the education, but then what gets them to stay is the connection. So sometimes those events at the beginning of the funnel to get them in have to be more heavily education focused, but then over time we start to we nurture them in like the community culture and mindset to see how valuable the connections are. So you do, I'm going to say, like, you want to experiment for yourself, but as a starting point, start with whatever ratio you have decided for the community, because that will give the prospective members an accurate representation of what they can find in the community. Once you get a little bit more confident in this process and you're experimenting with these events to see what's really going to get people like in the door, and what's going to get them converted and set up as good members, play around with it and see what ratio actually works well, because it could actually change as they go through the member journey in your community.
There's and I don't know if analogy is the right word, but there's something that I often use when talking about this, and it maps really well onto what you're talking about. Um, when I think about in-person events, there are in-person events that build audience, and there are in-person events that build community, that build connections between the attendees. And for example, movies build audience. Like, right, the whole point of going to a movie theater is to get that movie in front of as many people as possible. And you're literally told before the movie starts, don't you dare turn and talk to the guy next to you or we'll kick you out. Right? So movies don't do a whole
Yes,
lot to build
truly.
community. As opposed to like a speed networking or speed dating where the whole purpose is to meet other people. And I find it useful to look at the chairs, look at the seats when they're all pointed in one direction towards a stage or a screen. And this is what you're talking about when you're talking about the education components, right? Versus when the seats are all pointed at each other, like people are having coffee or they're at brain date at some of these conferences, where they get to talk to each other about topics that are set up. Um, that's, the connection part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can do both. I mean, you can think of a conference where there are keynote speakers and there are sessions. And so all the chairs are, it's that education component. I notice even the conferences that I go to, I've been going to podcast movement for many, many years. And when I first went, it was for exactly the reason you said. I was like, oh, I want to learn how to become a better podcaster. And in later years, the reason I kept going back, I don't even go to the sessions anymore. Now when I go, I just want to go hang out with all the people because I know that that's the one place where all those people are going to be together. So I think that's so
Yes.
interesting to hear you
Yes.
say that people initially might come for the education, but then once they realize,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what
The
that says
value.
about us that we undervalue the connection to other people until we actually feel it. But
Always. Well, and I don't blame it, because connection itself is so slippery and it's quite like, it just feels so soft and difficult to determine like what the outcome is of that, and you don't always know what the outcome is going to be. So I get it, especially in our like I don't know, I think our culture has a lot to do with this too, the culture that we live in. But ultimately, most mature communities, and what I'm speaking to here with like the education to connection ratio, I'm especially talking to the people who are starting out building community, because I'm a little bit more rigid and regimented about picking some boundaries and around your structure in the beginning, so that you are really clear about who this community is for and you don't get easily distracted. Mature communities will have lots of different types of activities with different ratios, and there might be more education here but more connection there. Like, that's a very natural evolution of a community to cater to a lot of different types of people. However, in the beginning, it's going to be a much easier process if you can stay really specific about who this is for and then how we deliver it. And it's why I tell my clients, I kind of trick them and like kind of mean when we like first come on to a call and we're talking about this ratio, and I ask them what they think their ratio is. And oftentimes they'll say, well, I think it's about 50-50. And I tell them, so that's the only wrong answer to that question. And it's not actually intrinsically a wrong answer. But my recommendation, if you are starting out, is the bad advice is I'm going to do half connection, half education, because that just really, it doesn't give you any guidance as the community leader about what to prioritize. Even if you have in your mind, it's 60% education, 40% connection. That's just going to be a clearer value proposition to your members. And it's going to be clearer when it comes to prioritizing the programming and the content. You're going to have a compass. You're going to have like a direction to head rather than trying to do it all the time.
So in the beginning, do you encourage people to lean more towards education or more towards connection? Or again, does it just depend on the type of community you're fostering, you're trying to build?
It just depends. There's no one right or wrong way to do it. So sometimes for communities where I've found where people are catering to someone who is at the beginning of a journey and they don't know what they don't know. They're in that, if you look at the 4 stages of incompetence, they're in like unconscious incompetence or conscious incompetence. If they're in those stages, a more education-centric environment tends to provide, like, they need a little bit more structure. Like, they just need to be told what to do. It's kind of like in elementary school when you're just learning in any subject. They're giving you all the rules. They're giving you all the grammar. They're giving you all the artistic rules of design. And it kind of sucks to have to follow the rules in the beginning, but you have to learn them in order to like know what tools you're using. So beginner communities that cater to someone at the beginning of a learning journey tend to be more education centric. Communities that tend to work with a more mature audience in their industry or practice or skill or whatever the focal point of the community is, will tend to see more value, and their members will also articulate more value in the connection centric environment. So that's like a very oversimplified version, but the only proper answer is it depends.
But the key here is to make a conscious decision about it. Like put some thought into it. In other words, don't just go 50-50, whatever.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Bri, I could talk to you about this forever, but I'm going to ask you one last question before we go here. This is something we ask everybody who comes on. Make a prediction. What do you think we're going to be talking about in the community space 5 years from now?
Yep. Well, I think we'll be talking a lot less about AI. maybe this is a controversial opinion. I think that AI will be like a really helpful tool in information organization in communities, but I think right now there's a lot of discussion about AI and like how to leverage it in community building. And I think we're just kind of in this chaotic fervor right now of like how it's going to unfold. But I think in 5 years, things will settle down and it's not going to be like kind of the hype that it currently is. I think we'll see it very accurately as a tool to be leveraged to make community builders' lives easier. And like that's kind of what we use it for. Right now, people are like, it's going to change everything. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical.
I,
I
I
also, yes,
I have a
yes.
feeling AI is going to turn out to be like email. Like it was really exciting at the beginning, and then everybody has it and can do it, and
Just like
yeah,
it's a new tool. Cool.
yeah,
That's great. Makes my life easier. Yeah.
right,
Um, and I think we will continue to see this move towards niche communities over like broad social media, like social network audiences. I think there is still a role for building an audience. There's still value in building an audience, and there will still be people who are doing it. But I think the majority of like deep transformative work is going to shift into these niche community spaces where they can be more properly facilitated and nurtured.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and we're seeing evidence that maybe we've hit peak social media. Personally, I'm hoping so. 'Cause,
For all our
uh,
mental health. Yeah.
but I think to your point, when we live in a world where there's Google and YouTube and ChatGPT, it's not so much that I don't need to know how to lose weight. Like all the information is right there in front of me. I need somebody who's going to yell at me or at least praise me. Yell at me if I don't go to the gym and praise me if I do. You know what I mean? That there are things that you get out of a community, whether it's accountability or motivation or encouragement, that go beyond just the knowledge, just the how to. And I
Yes.
think that becomes more valuable. So,
Yes. Yep. There
so
and we spent so much the social media play is like, well, we always want to meet people where they're at. Like we want whichever channel they're on, in whatever cadence, like we want to be able to get our message to them where they already organically are, which I do see value in that and in being able to get in front of the right people. However, when it comes to the transformation journey, if someone isn't even willing to like step into the curated, um, like intentionally designed home where this transformation is happening, do you really think that they're invested enough to undergo the journey of transformation that you've promised them? Like,
right.
I'm not so sure. So I do think these spaces will continue to get like more accessible. There will be less friction as the tools and technology continue to develop. And I'm specifically talking about communities built in like all-in-one platforms and where the community itself is its own dedicated home. But I think we'll only see a rise in participation and um, people's ability and willingness to enter into those spaces.
Well, that brings us right back to where we started, which is that you're a big proponent of making sure people have skin in the game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly
Well,
it.
Bri Leever, thank you so much. People can find out more about you at emberconsulting.co. A lot of great stuff there. And like I said, you've got a lot of great stuff on YouTube. But dear Bri, and we should point out if you're listening to this that Bri is spelled Bri. Also, absolutely fantastic podcast. So please go
Oh.
check it out. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks for having me. This was just a delightful conversation. This is one of my favorite topics. So you facilitated it beautifully.
Okay, thank you.